Sri Lanka are in a spot of bother against South Africa in the opening test of the two-match series at Kingsmead, Durban. Well, Sri Lanka in their first innings, after restricting South Africa to 191, they were bundled out for just 42, which turned out to be their lowest score in an innings in their test cricket's history. Now what it means is that Sri Lanka run the risk of losing the opening test at Kingsmead, Durban, and if that really happens, it would impact Sri Lanka's chances of reaching the World Test Championship final. So let's just see, what could be the possible scenarios if Sri Lanka lose to South Africa in Durban, and how a possible South Africa's victory in Durban would impact India's chances as far as a spot in the WTC final is concerned. Here's a look. Well, here's the latest World Test Championship standings. As we can see that a total of top 5 teams are currently in top position to qualify for the World Test Championship final. They all are in the reckoning. India currently are at the top of the table with a total of 15 matches, 9 wins, 5 losses, 1 draw, and a total of 110 points, with a total of points of percentages won is 61.110. And how this is actually calculated? Well, let me just explain you in a briefly that PCT, which basically is calculated by the fact that the number of points earned by a team divided by the number of points contested into 100. So in case of India, they have won a total of 9 matches, which means a win will give you a total of 12 points, and if there are a total of 9 wins here for India, it's going to be 12 into 9, 108. A draw gives you a total of 4 points. In case of India, they have 1 draw, so 108 plus 4, 112, minus the number of 2 deduction points that India have had because of slow over rate. So that's why India's total points are 110, which is the number of points that India have earned. And what are the total number of points that India have contested? Well, that's going to be 15 into 12, which is going to be 180. And how do we calculate PCT here? It's going to be 110 divided by 180 into 100, which will come out to be 61.110. In case of Australia, well, they've suffered a massive setback after losing to India in the opening test of the BGT at the Optus Stadium in Perth. They're still second in the standings with a total of 8 wins and 4 defeats. Sri Lanka have had a resurgence ever since defeating England at the Oval, and since then they've defeated New Zealand 2-0, but now they run the risk of losing the Durban Test against South Africa, and that might just impact their chances. And how would that happen? Well, let's just get to it very shortly. New Zealand are 4th. They are also still in the reckoning and they can still qualify for the final, and so is the case with South Africa, who are one of the hot favorites to qualify for their maiden WTC final. Now, before we get to the proper scenarios, let's just have a couple of assumptions in place so that there are no confusions there. So assumptions that we'll take for the possible scenarios are: Sri Lanka lose to South Africa at Kingsmead, which is something that I have been reiterating in this video. And secondly, there are no further slow over rate deductions. So these are the 2 assumptions that we are going to take into consideration as far as Sri Lanka's possible place in a World Test Championship final is concerned, and how the result of the Durban Test would impact India's chances there. Now, what happens if Sri Lanka lose to South Africa in Durban? Now, what this would mean is that Sri Lanka would still have a total of 3 matches remaining, 1 against South Africa, which is going to take place at the St. George's in Haibeha, and 2 against Australia, the defending World Test Championship winners. That is going to be a home series for Sri Lanka, and that's going to take place later in January 2025. And best possible finish for Sri Lanka would be 61.54, which would mean that if Sri Lanka lose the Durban Test, their best possible finish can still be 61.54, assuming they win their remaining 3 matches that are going to be there, 1 against South Africa and 2 against Australia. And if they lose 1 or more than 1 matches, then their PCT, which is going to be the percentage of points earned, is going to slip down to 50s, which is going to be near about 55 or 56, and that may not be enough for them to qualify for the WTC final that's going to take place at the Mecca of cricket in June 2025. Now, what happens to South Africa if they win in Durban? So South Africa would still have a total of 3 matches remaining, one against Sri Lanka in Haibeha and 2 against Pakistan, which is once again going to be a home series for South Africa. And then still their best possible finish would be 69.44. And assuming if they lose one of their remaining 3 matches also, their PCT, which is going to be the percentage of points earned, would still be well above 60, and that might just be enough for them to qualify for the World Test Championship final. So what this means is that South Africa can still afford one more loss, but anything which is going to be more than one loss would hurt South Africa's chances as far as a possible WTC final spot is concerned. Now, how Sri Lanka losing in Durban impacts India's chances for a WTC final slot? Well, then, in case of India, it's going to be an equal pressure. If Sri Lanka lose in Durban, there's going to be massive pressure on India. And if South Africa lose in Durban, then also there's going to be massive pressure on India, because what has really hampered India's chances is that they lost to New Zealand 3-0 at home. And that's why in the ongoing Border Gavaskar Trophy, India cannot afford to lose a test match if qualification without dependency is concerned. So India have a total of 4 matches remaining, which are going to take place in Adelaide. That's going to be a day-night test for India. Then at the Brisbane at Gabba, wherein India clinched a famous victory the last time and won their 2nd consecutive test series in Australia. Then the 3rd test is going to be at the iconic MCG, and the 5th and final test of the BGT that's going to take place at the renowned Sydney Cricket Ground. And out of those 4 matches, India must win a total of 3 matches and draw the remaining one so as to secure a place in a 3rd consecutive World Test Championship final. And as I said earlier, it's going to be qualification without dependency. And as far as qualification with dependency goes, well, it's going to create a whole different scenarios for India, because from that perspective, England might have to defeat New Zealand 2-0 or maybe 3-0 for that matter. They have to be 1-1 draw for Sri Lanka, which would mean that the 4 of the top 5 teams in the World Test Championship standings would have a PCT or points percentage of win in about 50 to 55 range, and that would really be the criteria wherein you would have to know the top 2 of this World Test Championship final, the top 2 spots later in January or February. Now, what about New Zealand here? When New Zealand have a total of 3 matches remaining, and all 3 are going to be against England. One is actually going on the opening test here. New Zealand 3 matches remaining, and the best possible finish is 64.29. Well, they have been bolstered after clinching a 3-0 win in India, and if they go on to defeat England 3-0 at home, then their best possible finish would be 64.29, and that would confirm their place in the World Test Championship final. One loss and they would run the risk of elimination, and they would have to depend on other teams' results so as to secure a spot in the World Test Championship final. Now, one thing is for sure as far as these scenarios go, that South Africa are one of the prime contenders to qualify for that final that's going to take place at Lord's next year in June. Why? Because they have a total of 3 matches remaining. They are currently in a prime position to win the Durban Test against Sri Lanka, and if they win remaining 2 or 3 out of their 2 matches of their remaining 3 matches, that's where South Africa would qualify for the final. And as far as Australia, India and Sri Lanka go, well, they still are in a precarious position despite being in the top 5, and a couple of losses here or there would mean that they would have to rely on other results to go in their favor. What do you think about the current World Test Championship scenarios, and do you think that can Sri Lanka pull off a surprise in Durban? You can let us know your thoughts in the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe to Sports Today for all the exciting updates and analysis from the sporting world. Until then, on behalf of my producer Shivam, it's Siddharth Gulati saying goodbye and good night.